Today, I'm going to talk you through, let's say, how to use the strengths and the weaknesses that you get as a character when you're playing 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars. You start off, there's a little key here. You can see you've got one available weakness and one available strength, and you can gain another once you gain a level, but these are one-time use. So if you're in a combat situation and you use your strength, it's gone. That's it. It's just gone until you level up, at which point you've got a choice of taking a strength or a weakness. And there are significant differences between strengths and weaknesses. They both use the flashback mechanism. So let me give you a working example to get your brain around let's start with the strength, right? So your team is fighting building to building, room to room. Your buddies are dying, your armor's been broken, you've taken a serious hit, you're wounded, you're a mess. You've even gone to the crazy lengths of taking the anger-inducing drugs that keep you moving when all else fails. That's it, you're basically down to one more hit and you're dead. But then, the skinnies, whose city you're fighting through, they ambush your squad. They come pouring up from underground parking areas and they start laying down the hurt on your team. You're going to die. You're trapped between a couple of ground transports, but they're on to your left and they're to your right. They're coming up behind you. Your team's in trouble and you have no more resources. If you take another hit, you're dead. So at this point, you use your flashback, your strength flashback. What you do at that point is you as a player, you narrate something from your past that could play into the current situation. So in this case, you have a flashback to when you were playing paintball as a kid back on Earth. And you remember you dropped out of a tree once and you dropped down amongst the opposing team and you laid waste to them. They didn't know which way to look. They just started getting hit by your pellets. And suddenly you're inspired by that flashback. You kick in your jump jets, you bounce across the roadway, crash in amongst the enemy. You take a couple of hits, but these are only fictional hits and not mechanics in the game. But the attack they're launching dissolves because you're suddenly amongst them and laying waste to them. Mechanically, you get to remove a threat token from this combat, and that could be the last threat token here, or it could just be one of 5. But you remove that threat token, and that ends the combat. Now, the remaining threat tokens, so let's say this combat started with 5, you've fought your way through 3 of them, that leaves 2, but one more hit and you're dead. The dice are rolled, you're going to die. At that point, you can just say, I use a strength, and here's your flashback. Okay, so you remove one more token, the referee gets that last remaining token back in his pool, but you've survived that combat. You've won through in that situation. So it's a great way of avoiding death. Let's take another scenario now. Let's take a look at a weakness. So you're fighting against the Fremen in the desert. Your team has come down from the rocks and onto the sand. The Fremen leap up out of that sand and the combat is immediately started as hand-to-hand. You're injured, your armour is ripped off, you're bleeding out on the sand, surrounded by these blood-crazed Fadakin. Flashback. A weakness. You remember the pre-drop training. The intelligence people, the scouts, had warned you about giant sandworms on this planet. They were attracted to rhythmic sounds. You were playing cards at the time. You didn't pay attention to that rubbish. They never know what they're talking about. But strangely, one thing has come through and stuck in your memory. They are attracted to rhythms. So you fall to the ground. Back in the fiction, you fall to the ground. You start pounding the sand with your fist in a rhythm. Bang, bang, bang. And in the midst of that fight, you now narrate what happens. So in the midst of that fight, a giant sandworm suddenly erupts from the sand, crushing friend and foe alike. Mechanically, one more threat token is removed from this encounter, and again, it could be the last threat token. But your character has to lose because you're using a weakness, right? The rest of the team can fight on if there's more threat tokens, but you personally, fictionally, lose in this combat. So in this case, your character's lifted up out of the sand by the worm, thrown into the air and crumples to the sand, unseen and unheeded 3 dunes away, and passes out. So it's all about driving the fiction. There is a minor mechanical effect from using a weakness and a strength. But flashbacks are precious. As I said, you gain a level. Once you've completed a mini planet campaign, you can gain a level. And that's when you get 1 strength and 1 weakness. And the strengths of flashbacks are that it's not just about you. For instance, if there's 1 threat token left and one of your buddies, one of the other players around the table, is about to be killed, what you can do is you can use up your weakness. You will, in the fiction, lose the combat, but it will remove that last threat token from the fight. So it's really useful for jumping in there and saving not just yourself, but possibly the entire party or just one other guy. But the strength, you win, and the weakness means your character is going to lose. There you go. That's Flashbacks for 3.16 Carnage Amongst the Stars.